Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast is about the journey to a more sustainable future in order for us to be able to do our bit to achieve net zero. I'll be discussing a variety of topics with experts in their field in order to educate and increase our knowledge of clean energy, electric vehicles and the electric vehicle infrastructure. So whether you're an individual wanting to make a difference at home, a small business or a corporate, this podcast is just for you. So on this podcast episode, I have got it's going to be a different type of podcast, isn't it, Dane? So I've got Dane Smith-Burchnell he's the co-founder of the Tiny House Company.
That's right.
So it's going to be, I think this is going to be a really, really interesting episode, Dane. Thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I appreciate the invite.
So my colleague Michelle Liddell, she found you, didn't she?
She did, yeah. She dropped us a couple of Instagrams, a few emails. She was particularly keen, which I love. It's nice to see.
So basically, Michelle is interested in sustainable living.
That's right.
And the Tiny House Company was on her radar straight away. As soon as she started looking, you were on her radar straight away. So you were founded in 2020. Give me a bit of background to you first.
Sure.
And how did you become co-founder of the Tiny House Company? And tell me a bit about the company.
Sure. Well, there's a long version, but I'll give you the slightly abridged one. So
give me the long one. It's fine.
Well, we've got time, I guess. So prior to setting up the company, I used to live in China for just shy of 7 years. Wow. And during my time there, typically speaking, I lived in opposite Hong Kong, so one of the biggest cities in the country. And it's very built up. It's predominantly small flats, apartments. And you soon realize that living in a small space, the average I lived in was 30 square meters, but I even lived in like a loft style place of about 15 or 18 square meters. So quite compact.
Yes.
And yeah, you just realize that you don't need that much space to actually have a good life, because we were outside most of the time when I was living with my partner. So I think that kind of got the cogs turning a little bit of what you can do in a small space. Very cleverly designed, little nooks and crannies with stuff. But then during my time there, I was doing lots of work and setting up companies, predominantly in food and beverage, working with hotels and the expat community. Mm-hmm. And then looking to come back to the UK and thought, well, what do I do? I'm in an R-ing, and then the wonders of YouTube popped up something called Tiny Houses. I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I've got a bit of a love for architecture, but I can't draw for the life of me. So that's not my forte. But yeah, just getting into it, you go down to a YouTube hole and you think, oh, okay. And then a month or two watching these kinds of things, you think, wow, this is incredible. And it was mostly people in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, even America. And you're thinking, well, all of these are, somewhat related, or they have similar laws. You think, well, okay, can this be a thing in the UK? So I did some digging. There was already a company set up in the north. And I thought, wow, okay, well, it's happening. People are interested in it. There was a need for affordable housing that hasn't changed, unfortunately, 4 years ago, nor prior to that. And I thought, well, I've lived in small spaces. I've really understood what can be done with it. And I guess on a whim thought, well, let's see what we can do. So fast forward a few months then, set up a website and got in touch with architects, kind of did some designs, took some inspiration, and lo and behold, the company was born kind of in that way, really. So it started off more of a social movement and helping people who were in need of affordable housing. And a really good case story, jumping a little bit, is a lady got in touch. She lived in Bath. A doctor, for all intents and purposes, doing the right thing, earning good money, but she was being priced out of her local village. The minimum mortgage was $500,000, so she couldn't even afford it. So then it only just really reinforced what we were trying to do. So she got a house, and then kind of was going to put it in the garden, so she could stay with friends and family and her network and not have to move a house without having to break the bank, even for someone relatively doing well, for all things considered. So that was the beginning of why the Tiny Housing Co. kind of formed. But over time, again, a bit of a passion for myself was the environmental aspect of things. And I was always interested in the environment and how we can live a slightly cleaner, greener life. And just over time, I think just looking at the elements of what we were doing, we were building in the UK in Warwickshire, we had a factory, and you're looking at some of the materials, and sometimes you're smelling these things, and you can feel it on your lungs, and you think, well, this can't be good for anyone, really.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
again, living that experience of thinking, well, why are we using these? And once you dig into it a bit more, you think, well, there are alternatives. So you go down another rabbit hole and you think, well, we can do better. And you look into Europe, especially into the Nordics or the Baltics, who are living in very cold climates, but they're using natural materials. And that's when we started changing from more of the social side of doing tiny houses to focusing more on the actual building itself, and how we forget that we now live in, the average person is 70 to 90% inside a house or a building at all times. So what are we breathing in? How are we living? What's it doing to our bodies, the psychological aspects? So when you really start thinking about what's surrounding you, it becomes really important. So that's kind of where we've got to today, is we've really been to focus on the structure as much as the environmental impact that we're building.
I love this. This is just so interesting. So right, okay. So
a lot to unpack.
No, that's just blown me away. I love the fact that that's what you've done. You've gone from looking at something, like you say, from a social point of view to actually the sustainability side, and actually recognizing, like you say, people are breathing all sorts of stuff in these days, aren't we?
Absolutely.
Anything that you're using, like, for example, if people are using air fresheners in their house and it's 100%. Not natural, good God, I mean, just think what you're breathing in. But nobody seems to bat an eyelid about it. But so it's great that you're doing this. So are the houses, so are they built modular? How do you build them in the first place then? Where so you're saying do you say they're built near to where you used to live in Leamington Spa?
So we used to build in the UK, and this is one of those things. So we had a factory for about a year and a half. And as I say, it kind of put us down the rabbit hole of thinking, well, what are we building with? What do we have access to?
Yeah.
And then to that as well, the skill set. Do people understand building in a different way? Bricks and mortar has been around for a long time, and the prefab market of, say, like caravans, again, has been around a long time, but everybody, from what we could tell, was doing the same thing. But if you do look to the continent, you look to Norway and Sweden, or Germany for that matter, and the eastern countries, they've been building out of timber for a very, very long time. Yeah. Well, as much as we have, Shakespeare's house is one of the oldest in the UK, but we've moved away from that. And so you soon consider, so what are we putting in? So we build in our factory in Latvia purely because of those three reasons. One, we can source lots of natural materials from the woodlands in those areas. It's all sustainably sourced. A timber frame built construction, and then we can either build it in a fully prefab, fully finished, it gets delivered, it's plug and play, or it can be modular where we can put units together. So kind of got two options depending on the size that we're looking at doing.
So is it all natural woods then? How is sort of how do you, I can imagine, is it one of those where you see it on a motorway where you've got a great, because I've been past, where you've got a great big kind of like a house, a modular house or something like that is on the back of an Arctic, where you've got all the cars going round it, kind of trying to keep everybody away. Is it that kind of thing? Is that what happens?
I apologise. Sorry, that might be us.
I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that,
We're not blocking up the motorway, I promise. But no, you're spot on. So typically what happens is, it's all a timber frame. It's all structural timber. And then the cladding is almost always wood. So we use something called thermo wood. So it's been heat treated and pressure treated to remove some of the water inside and the moisture level. And then that adds longevity to it, I think by another 20 or 30 years. And then it slowly weathers over time and gives that really nice, gorgeous grey, silvery effect that sometimes you see on cladding. If we don't use timber on the outside, then we'll use a standing seam, aluminium or steel. Again, it's recyclable, easy, it looks nice, it's architectural, so it's a win-win. And then when you dig into the insides, again, it's either using things like wood fibre insulation, wood fibre underlay, either a recycled glass wool, which again uses components from different materials, or it will have something, our internal boards, we don't use plasterboard. A few things, the gypsum's not great. Again, kind of what we were talking about with the VOCs. So we use something which is made out of recycled wood. So it gets put into a machine. It uses the natural lignin. So that's the oils that comes out of the wood,
Yeah.
pushed and pressed, and it creates its own little glue. And then you can create a board out of it. So again, it's a natural material that's being finished. We use zero VOC paints that come from Sweden or Norway. I can't remember. So yeah, really looking holistically at the individual materials that make up the components of the home. Because as you said, if you've suddenly got air fresheners on, you've got Bold, which is really strong, and you've got all these different things. Individually, they're fine. But when they just build up over time and over years, we actually don't know the impact of that. So there's some unfortunate research that is coming out to say all of these strong chemicals and VOCs and formaldehydes that are in typical building products through to household products, like we've just described, cleaners and sprays and stuff, is having an impact of, on arthritis, on our lungs and things like that. So it's something we're taking now a lot more seriously. We used to put wood burners in our homes, but we don't anymore because, the particulate matter that we find is, again, a growing body of science is saying it's negative, and the environmental impact as well of burning wood.
Burning carbon, absolutely.
For the pleasure of heating. So, yeah, it's really trying to look holistically on multiple levels of what it does for the building and what it does for the dweller who's inside it and using it as well.
That's fabulous. So, my God, it must have taken you a long time once you realised about kind of like, okay, we need to move this into a slightly different place in order to be more sustainable and make sure that you're not providing things that were full of chemicals and stuff. That must have been a long. How long a journey was it actually? Just
pretty
to
much
kind of
when we were you're exactly. It's still a journey. We're not finished. There's still materials and things out there that we would like to utilize from like mycelium or mushrooms. People are growing that to make an insulation. We're hoping in time that we might be able to adopt that. So we haven't finished, but yeah, it's been a good 2.5 year journey of proper research and development, of seeing what is out there, what's available, what can work, what's relatively affordable as well. There are other materials out there, but they're just very expensive. But ultimately, it's trying to find the best balance between what's on the market.
So who are currently buying, the tiny. So you're the tiny housing company. I said tiny house earlier, didn't I? But
Right.
So who are currently buying these then?
So initially, so we started off people who were just looking to live in them. They were a variety of people, young, middle-aged, older. But now what we're seeing as we transition, as things have changed, COVID and just the impact of the environment, I think people are more aware. We're seeing a different subsect. So one example is a lady. She, I think she's 55, 60. Can't remember her age. I didn't ask, so I'm guessing. And
You don't ask a lady, darling.
Absolutely, we don't do that. It's terrible. She was looking into this way of life for quite a long time. She got in touch back in late 2021. Wanted to downsize, get out of her house and just live more minimally and sustainably for herself. Took her almost a year to find some land. She thought she had some. Unfortunately, she didn't get that land, but then she found a farmer who had someone staying there on their land in a caravan that had residential planning. And then they left, and then so she could kind of come in and swoop in and take that spot. So she's been there, I think, for the last 8-9 months now, and she couldn't be happier. So that's the tiny house kind of side. Another side, we've got a couple down south in Wiltshire way, and they sold their bricks and mortar 3-bed semi or something, and they wanted to just reduce the burden of rising bills and things, and just again live more minimally. They bought one of our bigger homes. They had 2 dogs. And they just needed a bit of space, but still, relatively speaking, smaller than a normal house. Sold up, and now they're almost bill-free because the mortgage they're not paying for, they've used the equity in the house, and the bills, they're running off solar. So, sure, like right now it's winter, they're not generating maybe as much as they need, but ultimately throughout the year it will cover a lot of their costs. So all of a sudden they might be saving thousands of pounds per month compared to spending thousands of pounds per month.
Yes.
So, from an economic point of view, they've really benefited from as well, the benefit of just living more simply. So that's kind of the residential side. We've got people who are looking self-builders, who don't want to live in a static caravan for maybe a year or 2 years. So now they're seeing our models as a potential stopgap. Once the home gets built, they want something comfortable, and then they can live in one of our homes, one of the bigger models. We've got quite a few people speaking to us right now about that. And then moving on to farmers and holiday parks are now seeing that side of things, more sustainable holiday is that transition, what we're seeing a lot more interest in, where consumers are not thinking they don't want to just be in a normal kind of a cabin or a shepherd's hut. They want something which has got maybe a story to it, that I think they care a bit more about the building as well. So we're seeing now sustainability from the actual building as much as the holiday park or location being something important too.
Oh, this is just brilliant. So you were talking about the heating, weren't you? So are they all supplied with solar then, or can some of them have air source heat pumps?
Well, they always come with air source heat pumps. That's
do
standard. Yeah, again, we started doing that a little over a year ago, year and a half. Fully transitioned over to that. Again, we've tried a few different heating systems, but we've just found the heat pumps to be the best air source ones. And then with the solar, it's a choice. Some people are going to be connected to the grid,
Yes.
and they don't want it, or they see the benefit of maybe 3 to 5 years, they pay it back, and then they've got free energy for 20 years or something, depending on the lifespan. So yeah, it's a mixture of people going for that.
And what about, so you talked about buying the land, didn't you? Or, so somebody's got to buy a piece of land. If the land's big enough, can you actually put ground source heat pumps in there as well? Or is that something that you've not kind of experienced yet?
I would say yes. I don't see no reason why not. We haven't really gone into that because we don't get too involved in the groundworks, some of those foundational parts. But yes, some people would be interested in doing so. We just supply the air source heat pump as an easy plug in and play version, just so wherever it may go, whatever kind of land, or if it's a temporary nature, as I said, for people like self-builders, then they've always got some form of heating.
So the self-builders, I'm really intrigued by this. So self-builders, so we got on where we lived. There was it just happened that it was we didn't realise at the time it was one of my son's teachers. There was actually he was kind of renovating a house. It needed a lot of work, so they had a mobile home in front of or down kind of the side of the house. So for a self-builder, for them to actually buy a tiny house, does that actually go alongside? Will that be like a permanent fixture, or would they sell it on themselves? What would they do?
We've heard a couple of options. So some will typically maybe keep it. They will then put in planning for temporary planning to live in it, and then thereafter they will keep it in the garden if it's sizable enough as an ancillary accommodation like an annex. So then they can keep that and use it for friends and family or a garden room kind of style building. Or some people will sell it on. But one person has says they'll use it and Airbnb it. So I think it's got a couple of uses depending on the size of the land that they're living on and their funds and what they're looking to do in the end.
Yeah, I suppose Airbnb, I mean, that'd be a perfect, stay out there. It looks fine. You're not anywhere near us, but you can utilize that space and get some financial gain from it. So that's fabulous. So what? Right. Okay. So how many people would because I'm actually thinking about this. I was thinking, this might be a good idea for, many years down the line when I've decided to actually not work. I don't think that'll ever happen. But, so how many people will it fit? So how many bedrooms and what room sizes have you do you look at?
So we've got a couple of options. We've got ones which are small as just one king size bed, so 2. That's about 6 meters long, 3 meters wide. We've got a 2-bed tiny house option, which has got 2 lofts. So one goes up the main stairs and then one comes up a ladder. That's similar to what I was talking about earlier, the lady who was living in it. She's got one of those called the Nomad. And then you've got a larger version. So the couple that I mentioned earlier down in Wiltshire, they've got an Eden. So that's about 10 meters long by 3.5 wide. And it's got a loft in as well and then a lower bedroom. So they can be small and they can get bigger and bigger, through to some of our bigger models, which can be as big as 12 meters long and 3.5 wide, but 2 modules put together. So all of a sudden that becomes quite sizable, about 65, 70 square meters. So the same size as a home really, but then you're going into that territory of housing kind of size.
Yeah. So what are the regulations like for different sizes of tiny house then? And
Mm.
when you've bought the land, what kind of how does it work with building regs and things like that?
Yeah, so you've got two options. So if you were to buy the land and you were to put in planning for a residential dwelling, a house for all intents and purposes, then it would go into building regs and you would go through that typical process as if you were a self-builder buying a bricks and mortar, getting contractors in and doing so. It's not really any different. But then there's the route for the Caravan Act. So if you were to put like a temporary building on your land for the self-builders, and that's a caravan planning. But farms and agricultural land, equestrian land, this kind of thing could also have a route to put down a caravan, as long as it meets the rules, sizes, regulations for that as well. And that could be temporary dwellings for agricultural workers. That could be secondary spaces for family to be in. Somebody even suggested vineyards in the UK need workers. So they're looking at that aspect. So again, from a worker nature, they need somewhere nice to live and to stay and comfortable. So yeah, it depends on the use, the land, and I guess the structure at the end as well.
So you're saying caravan planning can be used as kind of like a semi sort of temporary structure, even though it would be there for permanently. Is that how it works, kind of thing?
Yeah, so it gets a little confusing because I know the term caravan sometimes it doesn't have the best connotations, I suppose. But in essence, a caravan is a structure built for human habitation,
Yeah.
which can be movable. That is
Yeah.
almost the simplest term. And so when you look at the plans, it can be something up to 20 meters long and 6.7 or at 6.8 meters wide. So quite sizable, bigger than most homes almost. So that then lends itself to a wide range of options. But then it just comes down to what the use is and where it's going. So farmers, that's why you'll see a lot with statics, because it's really simple planning and they can say, I need additional space. But then if you look at things like park homes, for example, they're designed for residential living all year round, council taxed. They have full planning permission, just like a residence, just like a normal home, but they come under the Caravan Act of sizing and spacing. So both could be used for residential living, but just a different kind of route.
Okay, because I was thinking so. In fact, bizarrely enough, so my brother, who is not with us anymore, bless him, he lived for about 6 months of the year out in Greece, and then he lived for the other 6 months in a static in Haworth, so up in Yorkshire, and obviously and it was quite a sizable static, and it was all on plinths, and obviously, so and I could see from your website that some of yours are kind of on plinths. I'm assuming, are they the ones that would be classed as a temporary structure then? But the ones that are permanent actually are kind of bedded in, sort of thing.
Well, even the permanent ones, say if you went to a park home, technically you'll see there's a brick almost skirt around it. If you remove that, it will still be on its trailer, on the chassis, but it will be just raised off the wheels so that the wheels aren't bedded. So you've still got your steel support as a foundation, but then it looks like it's permanent. But it could be removed, taken away, replaced, and then a new one put in, bricked back up, and then today you've got a new home. So
this is brilliant. I love it. Absolutely. So what you've sort of said a little bit about what other sustainability thing, what other areas of sustainability have you kind of been thinking of? You're obviously a creative person, where has this sent you off now that you've been doing all of this?
Really good question. So, I think as a company and as a personal ethos, trying to drive the company, we feel very much of the opinion that there's always other solutions out there to continuously improve. And what we're building today probably won't be the same in 2 or 3 years. As has certainly been the option. We started out, we tried steel framed homes, we did SIPs, we did timber, we did all sorts, but now we've kind of settled on what we're doing today. But I guess to answer that, so we're looking at, so innovative approaches to water heating. So we're using a water heater. I don't know if you've ever used one of those. It's kind of like a small little pouch of liquid, and sometimes you can press it and it cracks, and then all of a sudden it starts heating up. It's like a hand warmer.
I've seen them. I haven't actually used one myself. I think they're good for people who. So my husband's got Raynaud's, Raynaud's, so he calls them dead man's fingers. He gets white fingers when it's really, really cold. So, but you can use them for those kind of things, can't you?
Yeah. So that technology, it's a material that changes from soft to hard, and then it releases energy in the form of heat. So what they've done is put that into a material in a water heater. So when electric comes through, it changes it from a solid to a liquid and will release heat. But when it goes into its solid state, it acts as a thermal battery. It's hot and it's almost solid. And so when you want to release the energy, it kind of comes through. And that can be put through with an air source heat pump, can be put through a normal boiler, solar thermal, solar PV. So yeah, we've integrated that 6 months ago, something like that. It's working really well. It's much smaller. You don't have the negative of gas boilers. You don't have to have that side of things. So it's just fully electric and combined with renewable energy. So it's a win-win. We love those. They're really good. We're looking at shower water waste recovery systems. So again, you're kind of recycling some of that heated water rather than just sending it down the drain. The water's still hot. So if you can put that back into the system, you reduce it by anywhere from 30 to 75%. Again, these little small incremental changes. What else are we looking at? As I said, things like the insulation. We're looking at different kinds of insulation to use in the future. A wide range of things, I think. EV chargers from your solar, from your PV as well. So that integrates and how they can all work. So when you've got your car and hopefully in time when you've got a vehicle to load, you've got an additional battery as well, which is then going to bring that in, especially if the home's off grid. So you've got your off-grid car battery, you've got your PV battery, and then you've got your water battery, your heater. So, you're just storing as much energy as possible from what you're generating. And again, the cyclical system, even things like air to water generators. So making water out of thin air, because there's been a lot of droughts, wildfires, and places that are being, unfortunately hit by lots of problems as the climate is changing. So how can we build a self-sufficient home with some of the things I've just talked about, and then also being able to generate sizable amounts of potable water, again, for some of these uses. So yeah, there's lots going on, but it's when to start looking to use them. What are the use cases? Who really needs it? What's the right thing to put in time? So yeah,
it's fantastic. In fact, you just made me think. So we've got a Zappi charger that works. We had solar put in this year and battery storage. So we've got a Zappi that works with our solar as and when we get sun. But isn't that we don't get it that much at the moment, do we? But
no.
There's some of the stuff you're talking about is amazing. And actually, I've got to say, the words that you've used continuously improvement, continuously improving, and incremental changes, and that's music to my ears because of what the work that I do. And for those that are watching, and you've all seen this, if you watch the podcast, behind me, Dane, is this word Kaizen, which means incremental changes.
Yeah.
So you're talking my language. This is fantastic. The stuff that you're doing is just, this is such innovation. This is why I love running this podcast, because I talk to some real innovators like yourself, and this is just, it's amazing. So can I just ask you, this might be a bit cheeky and I don't know whether you want to answer this question.
Yeah,
so if we look at prices, obviously you've got to buy some land.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously that person's got to get the grid connection together, or if it's needed, for example, blah, blah, blah. But actually the tiny house itself, built in modular format for two people, what prices are people? Would I be looking at the price of a house in the southeast, or what prices are we kind of looking at? If you don't want to answer this question, then obviously you can.
No, it's absolutely fine. Well, it's on the website. People can see pricing, but it does vary depending on land. So you could buy land in, say, Yorkshire for maybe 10,000 an acre, but in, I don't know, the southeast or the southwest, it might be 30 grand an acre. So it does vary on land price. and the use, especially if it doesn't have planning. But for all in the, for general ideas, so that a tiny house for 2 people might be around 60,000, so no more expensive than a new EV. But then it comes down to, as you said, some of those other factors. So the groundworks, the installation, water, power, and then what do you do with it? So I'll give the example of a lady who's living on a farm. So hers is much cheaper because she's almost just buying her house and she's renting the plot of land for a couple £100 a month. And then she's got solar running her power, 8 to 9 months of the year. So she's got really minimal running costs. But for someone who's buying maybe land to self-build, then still, whilst the cost may seem similar to a normal house, say the house is 100 or 150 to buy one of our models, the bigger ones that meets minimum space standards for a dwelling, you might be able to buy the land with planning for say 100 or 200,000. So all of a sudden you're in similar territory to a traditional house. But how we see it is that nature of, the running costs obviously are significantly lower because it's a thicker wall and it's more insulated, it's more airtight. And then you've got the solar, which combines with it. And then some of those systems, you've got the air source heat pumps, which reduces things further. So whilst they might be comparable in price immediately, your running costs and your maintenance costs are significantly reduced. But the value of the house is probably higher once you do get it evaluated because it will be an A-rated EPC more than likely. So again, your value your upfront costs might be the same as the house next door. The value of that was probably going to be 20, 50, 100% more, depending on where it goes. So what you put in is certainly more when you get out at the end.
Yeah, definitely. But and the fact that you will be living in a sustainable house. I mean, is there? So obviously, bricks and mortar. You've kind of that it's going to stay. Everybody just sees bricks and mortar as that's the longevity of a regular house. Is however long, isn't it? Is there a kind of is there a lifespan to a tiny house then?
So in the UK, if you have a prefab or a modular house, they need to have a minimum lifespan of 60 years. And this is pretty much global. They say 60 years. France, I think, is 50 years. So it does vary slightly for different modules. But typically speaking, a normal bricks and mortar house is supposed to have roughly a lifespan of a minimum 60 years too. So they do base them on industry standards. But I think the perception, as you quite rightly says, is bricks and mortars is there forever. But then I guess one thing to look at that is that a good thing? We have some of the oldest housing stock of all of Europe. True. It's drafty, it's cold, it's high. Yes. The carbon footprint is not great. All combined, we're not building quick enough or we're not demolishing quick enough. So having something made from a sustainable material, which is potentially end of life recyclable or compostable, is that not maybe a better transition away from something more permanent? So Japan builds the houses a lot shorter just because they're in an earthquake zone and they're always building. So yeah, I think there's different ways to look at, is permanency a good thing? And it's not that these homes are not permanent. They will probably stay for hundreds of years. You look at Norway, Sweden, Finland, most of their homes are built out of timber and they've been around for a very, very long time. So yeah, I think it's public perception, unfortunately, which is negative towards maybe timber in its own right. And the concern with fire, which is reasonable, but there are materials to try and prevent. So
yeah, I mean, just thinking about what you were saying there about drafty and cold. I mean, our house is a 1950s detached. It's not massive, but it is really drafty. We're fighting at the moment, trying to work out how to insulate it properly, so you're right. And then looking at something else that I saw happening for years. So my in-laws live in St Albans in Hertfordshire, and basically their old house was extended. Part of it was knocked down and extended. On the same road in St Albans where they lived, there was a bungalow that was knocked down and and built into a big house. So it's kind of, I suppose, the modular nature of the your tiny houses, you can add on if you want to. Yep. It's not about having to knock things down. I mean, and just think about the carbon footprint now of a house that's you've had to knock. In fact, they didn't have to knock it down. It was fairly decent bungalow beforehand. But
Yeah.
obviously, somebody wanted a bigger footprint on that piece of land, and it was the builders. So do you actually? Do you know what? This is a question. Do you see the builders? The builders of today looking towards tomorrow, as in, so are they looking to be more sustainable, or are they still just looking to make a lot of money?
I would hazard a guess at both,
Yeah.
being diplomatic. But I think it's when you look at what they're saying. So the future home standards is coming out potentially in 2025. So that's new building regs, and it will improve massively. But compared to what we're doing today, and that's the same in some other industries within, say, again, caravan rules or other built structures. It's when you look at what's done previously and you're improving, it's great. But if you look at other countries or where they're at today or 10 years ago, it's actually not so great. So two things with that, maybe with insulation values or air tightness. Germany's air tightness, to get boring with those kinds of numbers, has been 10 times better than the UK for the last 15 years or so. And we're still going to be 5 times worse than them when these new standards come in. So again, it's where do you look at the ball, the mark of improving. So I think people have genuinely, they want to improve, they want to do better in the UK, they want better housing. Sure, there's a cost to do so, but I think we've realised now that having cold, drafty homes all of a sudden without cheap energy is a bigger cost in the long run. So it's when do you start looking at that change? And I think sustainability from an energy point of view through to the carbon footprint of the homes. Again, timber is actually significantly more sustainable, lower footprints. And then when you look at the heating of the water, as I say, if that's then tied in with things like solar or air source heat pumps, all of a sudden the built environment has a massively lower carbon footprint per person, per capita, and for our lives. And then again, the positive impacts of lower running costs and things like this. Surely we should be looking at our homes to have a bigger impact on all of those fronts. So yeah, I think more can be done, don't get me wrong, but again, that's industry.
And I was going to say, I suppose that at your end as well, the supply chain probably you need to kind of, obviously you've got your building in Latvia, the supply chain is going to have to decarbonise at some point as well, aren't they? Because they're probably using generators and all sorts of stuff, kind of using fossil fuels to kind of build the houses and keep the factories, kind of warm and things like that. So I'm assuming that's something that that needs to be looked at, doesn't it, long term?
Absolutely, yeah. And we've looked at our scope 1, scope 2 emissions and what we can do. And then that scope 3 kind of side, the supply chain is, of course, a difficult part. If it's run electrically or if there's gas heating and things like that, that's always something we want to look at. And again, that's our trajectory to try and be net zero at some point. And certainly our buildings that we are building will be very much so, hopefully by 2020, late 24, if not 25, because we've already made great strides to do so already from all the natural materials we've said, and looking at the EPDs and whatnot, or trying to offset as much as possible. Operational emissions, especially, with the solar and the air source heat pumps and some of these other appliances all combined, drastically reduces things. So yeah, it's a conversation always being had.
It's brilliant. Honestly, I'm really pleased that Michelle introduced us, because I think a lot of people will listen to this and actually it'll get them thinking about living more sustainably, and the fact that we don't necessarily just have to put up with living in a brick built drafty house. So yeah, I really appreciate you joining me on this. If people want to get hold of you, then so I will get your website right. It's in front of me now. So it's the tinyhousing.co.
Correct.
What about social media? If they want to find you, is your Instagram account kind of somewhere where you'd quite like them to see you?
Yeah, sure. So Instagram, Facebook is the Tiny Housing Co. I think all one word, so that's nice and easy to find. LinkedIn as well. We have a platform on LinkedIn if there are people from business or industry that are interested in asking questions too. and they can find myself on there as well. Just put my name in. It's one of the only ones. I've got an abnormal name, so it's really easy to find.
That's great. But listen, that has just been so enlightening. I really, really appreciate your time. It's just,
no problem.
Yeah, it's got me thinking now.
Good.
So yeah, I really absolutely I enjoyed that so much, and I hope everybody else has. I'm sure you have, because Dane's just been the create, the innovator in you. It's just lovely to speak to somebody like you. So thank you, Dane. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise, and say thank you to Michelle as well for getting us
on. I will. She'll be listening, and she'll get it then. But listen, so thank you to you. Thank you to everybody else for listening and watching. And I shall see you all next time. See you later. Bye. Thanks for watching this episode of Electric Evolution. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons to stay connected with us. And if you're inspired by our journey towards a sustainable future and want to support our mission on a monthly basis, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Electric Evolution Podcast. Your support really helps us to bring the latest insights and discussions in the world of clean energy, electric vehicles, electric vehicle charging and sustainability to you. If a regular subscription isn't what you're looking for, you can always consider buying us a coffee. Just head over to www.buymeacoffee.com/Electric Evolution Podcast. Every cup helps us to keep the electric evolution moving forwards. And if you're curious about our work in the EV infrastructure sector at Full Circle Continuous Improvement, why not visit us at www.fullcircleci.co.uk to find out more. And if you want to send me a message, you can always email me on liz@fullcircleci.co.uk. And finally, please don't forget to share this podcast if it sparked your interest. And let's keep spreading the word about all of these topics that we're covering. So, until next time, see you soon. Bye.